Coming up on The World Today. International condemnation for Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny's detention grows, as does calls for his release to the Russian government. The UK announces new measures governing travel into the country over fears of increasing COVID-19 cases. Plus, Uganda's main opposition still insists it will challenge President Yoweri Museveni's victory at the polls. A warm welcome to The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani in Lagos. We begin in Russia, where opposition leader and probably the Kremlin's biggest domestic headache, Alexei Navalny, remains in detention. The 44-year-old was detained soon after he arrived in Moscow on Sunday, defying threats by the government, and this could happen. Navalny was making his way back after 5 months outside following his poisoning on a domestic flight in Siberia. The US and the EU have been calling for his release.
Mr. Navalny from Israeli television, aren't you afraid? Mr. Navalny from
5 months since he left Moscow and was poisoned on a flight in Siberia, Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny was making his way back to Moscow, having no concerns about being arrested as he boarded a Moscow-bound plane on Sunday. He had announced his decision to return from Germany on Wednesday, and a day later, Moscow's prison service said it would do everything to arrest him once he returned, accusing him of flouting the terms of a suspended prison sentence for embezzlement, a 2014 case he says was chopped up. What was supposed to be a hero's welcome turned into an arrest of Navalny and his supporters at the airport. International condemnation has grown over the detention, with the US and the EU leading calls for Navalny's release, stopping short of threatening any punitive action. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Russian authorities are trying to silence their critics. Germany has demanded his release as well, saying it would discuss his case with its European partners. France, Italy and the President of the European Commission have also called for his release, as has the UK. Navalny himself has demanded an open trial so all the media would have the possibility to observe what he calls fantastic, absurd happening in Russia. His lawyers say they have not been allowed to see him since yesterday.
The UK government has begun tightening border controls from today to prevent new strains of COVID-19 coming into the country. The new measures include the suspension of all the travel corridor arrangements that had meant arrivals from some countries do not need to quarantine. All passengers must now have a recent negative coronavirus test and transfer immediately into isolation upon arrival.
Britain's new travel restrictions stem from last Thursday, when the country banned arrivals from South America, Portugal and some other countries over fears about a strain of the coronavirus detected in Brazil. The country has already felt the effects of mutations in the virus firsthand. A strain first discovered in England has proven to be more transmissible and a major factor behind a spike in cases across the country. Meanwhile, pressure on hospitals continues to grow in Spain after the country reported a record 40,197 new COVID-19 cases. The incidence of the disease measured over the past 14 days hit a new high of 575 cases per 100,000 people, climbing from 522 cases the previous day. Health officials have blamed lax adherence to restrictions on travel and socializing over the Christmas holidays for the surge in cases, which has prompted several regions to tighten measures over the past week. Over in France, 7 Nobel Prize laureates were vaccinated earlier today in an effort to convince the French public that vaccination against COVID-19 is safe and beneficial. The men, 4 in Paris, 3 in Strasbourg, are all scientists. They were invited to receive the vaccine by Alain Fischer, the immunologist coordinating the country's vaccination strategy, in order to show that men of science have faith in the vaccination process. Portuguese hospitals are scrambling to cope with the worrying surge in coronavirus infections and deaths that brought the country's healthcare system to its knees. Portugal had the highest number of coronavirus cases in Europe per million inhabitants over the last 7 days. The health system, which prior to the pandemic had the lowest number of critical care beds per 100,000 inhabitants in Europe, can accommodate a maximum of 672 COVID patients in ICUs. And finally, Brazil has begun its vaccination rollout as infections continue to surge across the country. On Sunday, regulator Anvisa gave the green lights to vaccines from Oxford AstraZeneca and China's Sinovac. Moments later, Monica Calazans, a 54-year-old nurse in Sao Paulo, became the first person to be inoculated with Coronavac, developed by Sinovac. About 6 million Coronavac doses have already been produced in Brazil, while the government is waiting for shipments of the AstraZeneca vaccine from a laboratory in India.
In the meantime, Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, says the world is on the brink of a catastrophic moral failure if rich countries buy up COVID-19 vaccine doses while not considering poor countries. He denounced the me-first attitude of wealthy nations and also blasted vaccine manufacturers for chasing regulatory approval in rich countries rather than submitting their data to the WHO to greenlight vaccine use globally.
The world is on the brink of a catastrophic moral failure. And the price of this failure will be paid with lives and livelihoods in the world's poorest countries. The situation is compounded by the fact that most manufacturers have prioritized regulatory approval in rich countries, where the profits are highest, rather than submitting full dossiers to WHO. This could delay COVAX deliveries and create exactly the scenario COVAX was designed to avoid, with hoarding, a chaotic market, an uncoordinated response, and continued social and economic disruption. Not only does this me-first approach leave the world's poorest and most vulnerable people at risk, it's also self-defeating. Ultimately, these actions will only prolong the pandemic, prolong our pain. The restrictions needed to contain it, and human and economic suffering.
It's just a few days to the inauguration of America's 46th President, Joe Biden, and the capital looks anything close to a war zone, with many streets barricaded in preparation for Wednesday's event. Right now, we're hearing the capital is on lockdown due to external security threat. Let's talk now to our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird. She joins us from location in the U.S. Maria, let's talk about what's going on and this external security threat in the U.S.
Martha, thank you for having me. Yes, we are in, right now, the lockdown, just to be clear, has been lifted. They just briefly lifted the lockdown due to the fact of the security threat that was a fire that was taking place under a bridge that was just a few blocks away from the Capitol. And so at this time, they have lifted that lockdown. Obviously, everything in Washington is on very high security, high alert. We have seen individuals being arrested, being detained. We've seen individuals trying to break through the security perimeters of the Capitol by providing falsified inauguration credentials and passes to be able to get through. And so we've seen a number of things happening over the last few days that would lead to extra paranoia and, more importantly, the extreme measures of security to ensure the safety and security of not only the incoming administration, but the senators in the Capitol and also those individuals who are rehearsing for the inauguration.
And what is the mood in the Capitol? I mean, it's just 2 days to the inauguration and all of the security features and apparatus being put in place. They're all in the build-up to Wednesday. How do people feel about this?
People are very nervous, to be quite honest. I think you have a mixed emotions. You have people that are excited to see what's happening. As we know, there's 12 executive orders that are planned to be put in place come Wednesday afternoon. So they're looking to see what's going to happen, but they are very nervous, very concerned as to what could transpire in the next 48 hours.
Maria, thanks for bringing us up to speed. Keep your eyes on the ground. Up and ears on the ground. Thanks for joining us. At least 25,000 members of the National Guard have been deployed to Washington, D.C. Security has also been beefed up across the United States as reports of protests turning violent fill to the air. Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird had an exclusive interview with the vice chair of the National Black Police Association, Commander Suswana Kirkland, discussing security and protection of the U.S. as it looks to transition presidential power.
Commander Kirkland of the Ramsey County Sheriff's Office, we thank you so much for joining us as we know that we're in interesting times in the U.S. as the U.S. Capitol has been under attack over the last week, and we know that we are preparing for a major inauguration come January the 20th. Can you tell us exactly what happened? How was there such a siege of onslaught onto the U.S. Capitol? And most importantly, how was there such a lack of protection of one of the most momentous places in the United States?
So I can just tell you that, the attack on the Capitol was just, it's a major breach of security. That scene unfold as all my colleagues here in the state. And, we were devastated by the care that was taken for such violent protesters. I believe I even recall one of the officers walking a woman down the Capitol stairs as to he didn't want her to fall, and so he's literally walking her out of the Capitol and down the stairs. And we immediately envisioned if the shoe was on the other foot, that wouldn't have been such a casual walk down the stairs to safety. And so, what we witnessed was appalling. It was a definite breach in security, and it does not help our efforts at working towards truth and transparency and, equality.
Now, you talk about equality, and we can't help but mention that you are in the state of Minnesota, and knowing that was kind of the catapult for the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement back in March. Mm-hmm. And so can you tell us how are officers of color responding to watching this kind of, lack of protection and surge upon the Capitol, but yet and still Americans in the world watched many peaceful protesters dealing with armed forces, dealing with excessive force by officers. How is that playing through, especially with officers of color?
Yes, I would say Minnesota sort of catapulted everything that we're really seeing play out today, as far as, protesting goes. And there is definitely, a double standard as to how both sides are treated. And don't get me wrong, I am all for peaceful protest. I'm not at all for burning down, rioting, looting, destroying family businesses that people have literally, it took decades, on blood, sweat, and tears and of individuals and of families. And you've seen that here just literally go up in flames. And that is not okay.
Welcome back to The World Today. We're checking in on the aftermath of the presidential election in Uganda. The main opposition candidate, Bobi Wine, is set on challenging the victory of President Yoweri Museveni. He has also said troops raided his party's headquarters. Wine, who is himself under house arrest, says party leaders are now on the run.
My wife and I are under house arrest. The military, in their hundreds, have surrounded our house. Many of them have jumped over the fence and have taken control of our compound. Nobody is allowed to get out of home and nobody is allowed to enter. We have run short of food supplies, but when my wife tried the day before yesterday, when she tried to go to our garden to pick food, she was assaulted by the military. We are isolated. Our lawyers are not allowed to access us. Our political leaders of our party are not allowed to access us. Even journalists are not allowed to come and see us. But my wife was assaulted when she was trying to access the garden to pick some food there. We have been surviving on the little that was in our kitchen. The only practical plan now is to inform the world, to see that fellow citizens of the world can help us exert pressure on General Museveni to stop these illegalities, to stop this impunity. I am a presidential candidate, and it is not a crime running against him.
Guatemalan security forces on Sunday used sticks and tear gas to beat back a large migrant caravan bound for the United States just days before the advent of a new administration, which urged travelers to abandon the journey. Looking at a large section of the caravan, which clashed on the road early on Sunday with Guatemalan security officials, some 3,000 of whom had mustered by the village of Vado Hondo, about 55 kilometers from the borders of Honduras and El Salvador. Footage we're looking at was obtained from Reuters, showing hundreds of migrants bound by a hillside, pressing into a wall of security forces which used sticks to repel the surge. An unspecified number of people were injured in that encounter. During the chaotic melee, security forces fired off a tear gas canister and a stun grenade to disperse the crowd. But even if the migrants do get past, Mexico is preparing to stop them at its southern border, with hundreds of security forces arguing it must contain the spread of the coronavirus. Authorities in China are racing against time to save 12 miners trapped underground following an explosion in a gold mine a week ago. The workers are still alive, thankfully, so they found out. How did they know? Some of them managed to pass a note saying, "Don't stop trying to reach us," to rescue 7 days after the accidents. The fate of another 10 miners missing after the explosion remains unclear. Mining accidents in China are not uncommon and often are due to poorly enforced safety regulations. Long after the sun sets on a quiet farm in the Dutch town of Leestad, one of its fields comes to life with a beautiful display of red, blue and ultraviolet LED light beaming across its crops of leeks. An installation pairing the plant's natural beauty with a futuristic LED is part of Grow, artist Dan Rusgaard's latest project, intended as an homage to farmers and to inspire them to experiment with artificial light in outdoor farming. Using specialized LEDs to assist crops grow in greenhouses has become common, and vertical farms in cities grown entirely with LEDs are a new trend.
And so what's a light recipe? That's a specific wavelength designed to activate something, right? We as humans are very sensitive to light, sun or different colors, but so are plants. And so we found out the red and the blue light help plants to grow better. And this has been around for many years, but indoor, nobody has ever done it outdoor. And the notion of ultraviolet light, which can sort of boost the resistance of the plant and therefore reduce the use of pesticides. In order to have that effect, if you would shine it continuously, one part of the plant would have the same intensity of light continuously. So you want to have an equal distribution. So we started to scan the plants with these wavelengths of light, and then suddenly it started to dance, the light. You had these huge fields of fireflies, and we were testing it, and it was sort of, the magic started kicking in or something. So I think that's when the world of science and art and design started to collide and enhance each other. The mission was to do something from a creative perspective, from a design and innovation perspective. On one hand, showing the beauty of sustainability, of sustainable agriculture, and on the other hand, sort of, that's my personal interest, sort of highlighting science or light science to speed up potential development to improve the world. So it's a combination of sectors. Yeah.
And as we end the world today, there's absolutely nothing you could not do as long as you set your mind to it. And that's what Youssef Abu Amira, a Palestinian law school graduate who's never let his disabilities hold him back, thinks every day. Youssef was born without legs and with only partially developed arms. He's taken up a new challenge, karate. The 24-year-old orange belt showed his stick fighting skills as he trained with his coach at Gaza's Al-Mashtal Club for martial arts. His mastery of the stick helps him make up for his missing limbs, and he's learned how to deliver strong punches and fend off attacks with his body and arms. A resident of Gaza's beach refugee camp, Abu Amira travels along city streets in a motorized mobility scooter. He graduated from the Islamic University of Gaza's College of Sharia and Law last year.
أنا الحمد لله رب العالمين بعمل 80% أو 85% من أموري لحالي. الأكل السندويشات باكلها لحالي.
Absolutely amazing. There really isn't nothing Youssef cannot do, and neither is there anything you cannot do. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.